Do you know him and his contributions to the surgical fraternity? Or him? Michael DeBakey pioneered the development of many medical devices used in the field of CTVS, has also pioneered vascular surgeries, many of which even bear his name to date. Emil Theodor Kocher not only received the Nobel Prize for introduction of asepsis in surgery, but also developed many surgical instruments which are used even today. So what has changed since the time of Kocher and DeBakey? There's been a steady shift of medical device innovations from clinicians to the larger corporates and startups which have backed a lion's share of innovations in the medical device industry. So we've got a steady shift from the pull innovations where clinicians, caregivers and patients form a core of the innovations and involve multinational corporations only towards the later stage, to a push innovation where teams of researchers work in the lab and try to push their innovation to fill a clinical need without input from clinicians. The push model has led to the Foley's Folly, an anecdote that I keep sharing with anyone and everyone who'd lend me their ears. Don't tell me none of you have struggled maintaining the no-touch technique while using the Foley's catheter owing to the poorly designed plastic sheet covering it. Compare this with the silicone catheter, which has a plastic sheet with serrations that allow it to be easily torn off while placing the catheter using a no-touch technique. A perfect example of a push innovation, one that is created in the lab with minimal interaction or feedback from the end user. So here's what my YT-180 challenge video is about: design thinking, innovation, and the surgeon. Let's first start with why are global surgeons in general and Indian surgeons in particular taking little interest in creating, innovating, and designing devices for their own use? Is it because of the time and cost required for device innovations? Or the sheer workload on the surgeon today that results in him having little time to think about anything other than clinical practice, while at the same time worrying about the next exam or the next duty, or even what to do after finishing with the degree or fellowship course? Which has led all of us to the rat race, one that we can't avoid to reach the pinnacle of success in our chosen fields, but also one that precludes surgeons from working on anything other than clinical practice and research. Which is exactly why, after finishing my master's in surgery, I chose to move away from the rat race. I dropped out of my MCH seat that I'd secured and moved on to greener pastures. Well, not only figuratively, but even literally. As a part of an exchange fellowship with AIMS, Stanford University hosted us for the best part of a year, where we spent some time at the Stanford University School of Medicine, a lot of time at a lab in the beautiful James Clark Center, some time at the School of Engineering, a fraction of our time at the Graduate School of Business located at the other end of the campus, and a large chunk of our time at the Stanford Hasso-Plattner D School, or the Design School. The Design School, with its open interiors and the excellent Julian and Doug pictured here, two famed psychiatrists with vast experience in the design thinking process, really changed my perception and thought processes, one that was confined with years of blinded textbook education. This is where I was introduced to the design thinking process, a 6-step process which sums up everything one needs to do to achieve success, be it with product designing or even surgical innovations. Starting with empathizing with the end user, seeking to understand users in a non-judgmental manner, interviewing them, shadowing them, or even trying to be in their place. And then clearly articulating the problem that one faces, but staying solution agnostic. And then comes the brainstorming potential solutions, selecting and developing your solutions, designing a prototype a looks like, a feels like, or even a works like prototype to test your solution hypothesis. The prototype could be something really grounded to something completely ridiculous, such as this, which is a human levitation system to get around the Stanford campus. Follow this up with testing the prototype. Test, retest, and test again to continually improve your design and gain user feedback. But the process is continuous and iterative, that is, it's non-linear, unlike most things with us clinicians, which are usually linear. If you want to be a designer or an inventor, you need to repeatedly go back one or more steps along this process to help you move 10 steps forward. But that begs the question, how will this help you? Well, to answer that, I'd like to tell you how it helped me. While doing my residency 7 years ago, there was an idea that came about after noticing senior surgeons struggling while applying tackers for ventral hernia IPOM repairs, because that was the norm back then. That's when I analyzed the problem, thought of a solution, and discussed it with my colleagues and medical device representatives. 4 years later, the articulating tacker came up. How I wish I knew how to patent this idea back then. 3 years ago, after I finished the fellowship at Stanford and Ames and started a minimal access surgery fellowship at Sheth Hospital, I realized I need to put in hours practicing endosuturing and dissection, so I'd convinced my boss to allow me to perform at least some steps of advanced lab procedures. The endo trainers available in the market at that time were very unaffordable, and I didn't know anyone who'd give them to me for personal use without charging me. The need was simple, a cost-effective way to practice endosuturing at my own convenience. That is when I came up with this, using a plastic box, some wood pieces coated with soft foam, Velcro strips to hold it in place, condemned laparoscopic instruments, discarded ports, a USB camera chip, complete with a 3D printed external cover, my very own laptop, and, to improve ergonomics, reference books we surgeons never use. Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine and Park's Preventive and Social Medicine. The total cost, only Rs 1,750. There are of course other examples, but let's keep that for another time. So friends, I'd like to end here by saying, let's say no to medical device corporates and companies that indulge in push innovations, which don't consider the end user feedback and create devices to be used by us without including the majority of us in the design process. We, the Young Turks, are an innovative bunch and have it in us to strive to be like these surgeons, creating, innovating, and taking ideas from the drawing board to the lab and finally the end user. I hope you guys find this useful. I'd like to nominate Dr. Ashish Dev for the next YT-180 challenge video. Ashish, let's see what you have in your locker.